of students viewing us via Instagram Live, so I want to be mindful of their time as well. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shawntrese Riley Stanford. I'm an academic advisor in the Pre-Health Pre-Law Advising Office, and today's workshop is going to be on how to ask for letters of recommendation. And I am joined by Justin Shaw in the back there. He's actually into med school, so he's going to come up at the end and just kind of give his perspective, because who knows better than someone who's actually had to go through this process. So he'll come up and answer any questions and give you some tips on how to get those letters of recommendation, especially from faculty. I think that's the hardest group to get letters from. So we'll go through some tips and also talk about those as well. So how many of you have ever visited our office before? Okay, so you've at least been in for advising. If you haven't, I highly recommend it, especially if you're coming up on your application cycle and you're planning to apply this upcoming cycle. Yes, okay. So if you haven't seen us, it's a good idea to do so, just to make sure you have all your ducks in a row, that you're fully prepared to go into this application cycle. And if you haven't done so already, I highly recommend registering as a pre-health student. This workshop should have been targeted to both pre-health and pre-law. So you want to register as a pre-health or pre-law student on our website. That way, when we have workshops, school visits, any type of information we need to send out for your group, you'll get those emails addressed to you. So let's talk about letters of recommendation, why you need them and why they're important. So letters of recommendation are very critical. It's a part of your admissions application. You cannot go forward. Your application won't be complete until those are in. And it's all about the quality of the letter, right? So AAMC did a study a couple years ago to determine how important letters of recommendation were. So they did a study on, and they kind of ranked how important they were first for interview invites. So it ranked at about number 4 or 5, but once it came down to offering admission, it went up to 2 or 3. So that just shows you, even after interview, how important letters of recommendation were in the decision-making process for admission. So some words of advice from those who've written letters. You basically want to make sure that these letters of recommendation are descriptive. It's one thing for a letter writer, especially a faculty member, to write about, oh, the student got an A in my class, and they did some research here, and they're super involved in APA, for example. That's stuff that they'll see from your application. The letter should go into depth about your character, how you are as a student. Were you willing to help other students out? Did you stay after class? Did you ask thoughtful questions? So it goes a little bit deeper into your character. So let's look at weak versus strong letters. When it comes to the letters of recommendation, like I said, it should be very specific, including memorable examples. So for example, I didn't write any letters for Justin for med school, but if I had to, I could say anytime I asked him to help me out with the workshop, he was there, he was willing to do that, and anything else that I needed. So it's those types of things that you want to do so that it can be transferred into a letter of recommendation for you. And not just faculty. Think about physicians and PAs and dentists that you're going to shadow, law professionals that you're going to work with. These are your future peers and colleagues. So you want them to be able to describe how you'll be as a future healthcare or law professional in your field. Weak letters are very short and vague, like I said, very general. Things that you could find on the transcript or on the application. Does anyone want to read this for me? An example of a weak letter? Yes, ma'am.
Jane is a double major honors student in X and Y with a cumulative average of 3.45. I am the chief undergraduate advisor in X. Jane is focusing her X major on issues of both minority and urban settings. Jane has been able to meet the demands of both her majors, as well as spend her semester doing an internship and study program abroad.
So not bad, right? It has some interesting stuff, it lays out facts, but these are all things I can find. 3.5 GPA. The application system calculates that. The major, it's on the application as well. Major issues in urban settings, that might be an entry of research or an area of interest on the application as well. So these are all things that I can infer and figure out in other places. But when we talk about a strong letter, immediately you're drawn to those descriptive words: passion, enthusiasm, excitement. That's what hopefully you want your letter writers to write about on these letters of recommendation, okay? And then I'm gonna get into a little later why you shouldn't push, because as the coordinator for the letters packet last cycle, I've seen very bad letters and I've seen great letters. And there's a difference between the two. So you don't wanna push, because then you may just get, this student is highly recommended for med school, they got an A in my class. I literally seen letters that were 2 sentences long. And then I've seen letters that were 2 pages long. And you want the 1 and 2 page letters. So how can you increase your chances of getting letters of recommendation? Out of all the students I advise, for some reason, not the MCAT, not the application process, not even the cost of this whole stuff, it's usually the letters of recommendation that stress the students out the most. And I think it's because it puts you out of your comfort zone. So if you're a student who goes to class, you raise your hand if you need to, you get the concepts, you feel, okay, I don't need to visit office hours, or I don't really need the additional help. So it's hard to develop those relationships, especially with faculty members, right? And then we're also at UCF. UCF is huge. So a lot of the classes that you're taking, 300 and 400 students are in the class. So you have to find ways to stand out. Even if you don't have questions about the material or coursework, go visit office hours. Find common ground to discuss with those faculty members. So when it comes to your professors, they're expecting this. So every year there's a letter writer panel workshop that goes on. I think PDSA does it, and I'm not sure if there's another club that partners with them. And you hear from letter writers, and they say don't be afraid, especially your science faculty. They know that you need these letters for health professional school. So don't be afraid to go in, make it known, hey, I'm pre-PA. Hey, I'm pre-law. Like, I need a letter of recommendation, and I want it to come from you. But try to find ways to talk to them. You know, you may go into Dr. Dow's office. Anyone took Dr. Dow? Yes. Anyone who has taken her knows she loves elephants. That's her research area, infertility in female elephants and reproduction. I love elephants. You may not. Or, you know, you find a way to spark those interests and develop conversation with your faculty members. So same thing for both medical and law professionals. I know for my pre-law students, do I have any pre-law students in here? Yes, I do, okay. So not all the time you'll have that interaction with professionals in your field, unlike some of our healthcare professional students, only because you're not required to have shadowing or any pre-law experience. So it may be a little harder, but if you do get that internship or just interview with a law professional, that's definitely an in to ask them questions about the field to develop those relationships. You definitely want to find someone that's familiar with your activities and what you've done. If you see a professor and they can't identify you in the hallway to say hello, that probably means you need to do a little bit more relationship development. And I'm going to talk about some other ways to develop those relationships as well. One thing I do want to point out is that you don't want to get letters from friends or family members. So you may have an uncle that's a lawyer or a cousin that's a doctor. That's okay for shadowing, that's okay for interviewing and asking about the field, but you don't want to get letters of recommendation from them. They can come off as biased, so you just want to be careful with getting letters from family members, friends, things like that. So how to get to know your faculty. One way is research. Hopefully most of you in here are involved in research. Whether you are health or law, research is a critical skill just to possess in general. Some students don't even know what it is. That's why we have the Office of Undergraduate Research you could visit. Justin, you did research, right?
Doing it now.
Still doing it. And he's in med school. So that shows you how important it is. Like I said, no matter if you're health or law, it's an important skill to possess. But it also allows the relationship development with that faculty member who can in turn write you an awesome letter of recommendation. Actively participate in class. Don't do like I did freshman year and sit in the back in economics and fall asleep and had to retake it the next semester. Actually sit up front, raise your hand. If there's room for participation, do that. I always notice that, you know, even in workshops like this, like the students who are a little bit more engaged or who are willing to read and participate. Like I said, this is a big institution, so you have to find ways to stand out, especially amongst peers who are on the same path as you. You have to find ways to stand out and be unique. Stay after class. This one can be a little hard because depending on your location, depending on the professor's schedule, they're probably trying to get out of there just as quickly as you are. So use sound judgment. If you see that they're in a rush or things are going on, try to make it to office hours and not hold them up before or after class. Don't even ask them for letters before or after class. I feel like that should be something done in a more formal meeting or setting. So just use judgment when trying to interact with professors as well. They're humans, they have lives, they have things going on as well. So be mindful of that and definitely visit office hours. Another way, which Justin, you TA'd as well, right?
I tutor.
You tutor. So TAing, tutoring, supplemental instruction, that's another way to get experience so that you develop the relationship with the professor for letters of recommendation as well. So some additional tips, look for common ground. Like I said, Dr. Dow loves elephants. Dr. Bavero is big on race cars and racing. So, you know, find ways to talk to them about things they have going on. They're not just here teaching you. Dr. Dow even does cave diving and all this amazing stuff. I follow her on like Instagram and YouTube and I see all the amazing stuff she's doing. But that creates conversation. And they want to know that you're interested in what they do as well. Ask them about their career path. You know, did you always think about teaching? You know, how did you get into this? Because they want to know that you're interested. And people like to talk about themselves, so you'd be amazed at how much conversation would open up with you asking them a few questions. Discuss your future plans. You don't have to beat around the bush. They know that there's something that you want, so be open about it. Listen, I appreciate this genetics class, I'm learning, but I want to be a future dentist. I want to be a PA. I want to be a lawyer from that legal studies class or teacher. Be open, be honest about what your intentions are so that they know up front. And they'll let you know, hey, I don't have time to do it, I can't do it, and you know you can move on to ask someone else. And discuss any challenges that you may be facing in the course. So I think a lot of students feel that you have to have an A in a class to ask for a letter of recommendation. I don't feel so. I feel that if you got a B in a class, but you worked hard for that B, and you put in the work, and you did supplemental instruction, and tutoring, and extra homework assignments, and that's the grade you ended up with, that's okay. But it's able to, it allows a way for them to show, you know what, yeah, so-and-so got a B, but they worked super hard for that B. They were resilient, they didn't quit. So don't feel that you have to have an A in a class when it comes to faculty letters of recommendation. Okay, so let's actually talk about getting these letters of recommendation. So how many letters will you need? Well, that depends on your profession. So PA students will need a different number from dental, from law, from med. Also, it depends on the school. So I'm using med as an example. UF Med asks for 3 letters of recommendation. They don't care who those letters come from. They're not specific on their website. But UCF College of Medicine is saying, I want 2 letters from science faculty, 1 from a non-science, and 2 others. So you have to look at the programs you're applying to, take the bigger requirement and use that as a guide for your letters of recommendation. The one thing you don't want to do is not meet what they're asking for, and I see that. If they want a science faculty letter, that doesn't mean Dr. Putzer's prep class. Does that make sense? Unless he taught you in a science course, that won't qualify as a science letter. And I've seen students be disqualified from admissions for that. Yes?
Would psychology count as a science or non-science?
That would be non-science. So when I think of science to kind of help you get in that mindset, it's usually disciplines that, usually courses that fall under the discipline of biology, chemistry, physics, and math is how I see it. And then if you have any gray area courses, feel free to ask us and we can help you work through some of those courses, like Patho. That's a good one, right? Patho's prefix is HSC, which is health sciences, but that's a science class. So those types of things we can help you decide. Yeah. Yes, I think I went over all of that. Choosing who to write the letters and then how many letters you need, so on and so forth. Okay, and then this is where I get into not pushing. Faculty are busy, and you have several other students who are on the same path as you. So if you find that a faculty member is hesitating, they're being a little lukewarm about wanting to write a letter of rec, don't push. Thank you for your time, and have someone else in mind that you could go to get a letter of recommendation. Because like I said, these could hurt as well as help. So you don't want to give yourself any type of disadvantage to your application. So let's talk about planning ahead, timeline, deadlines, and things like that. So applications are soon to open, right? PA opens in April, Med opens in May, Dental opens in May. Some of the submissions are a little bit later, it just depends on your profession. For law, that's September, which actually you can still apply right now, depending on where you are for my pre-law students. So when it comes to needing these letters of recommendation, keep in mind the deadlines for your programs, but also set your own. So if you know that you want to submit your application June 12th, for example, you should set their letter deadline maybe a week or two before that, just to give them some wiggle room in case they're running behind or things happen in life. So you do want to give them some wiggle room, but you want to give them at least a month to write the letter. So you don't want to ask someone to write a letter on a Friday and say, I need this by next Wednesday. That's not fair. So you do want to give them a deadline, but just make sure it's not your final. Give them one that's a little sooner. And feel free to check up on them once you ask. So your deadline for them was June 8th. It's June 2nd. You haven't seen any movement. Follow up very, very gently. So you don't want to put yourself out there in any way where you're showing frustration. Even though you may be frustrated, you still have to maintain professionalism. So I always tell students to still have backup plans. Even if someone agrees to write you a letter, still have a backup plan because things happen. So how are you going to ask for your letter of recommendation? By phone, email, or in person? In person, as much as you can. But also we have students who have transferred from other institutions, maybe here in Florida, out of state, professors that have sort of moved around. So in that case, I could understand calling them up if you still are in contact, sending them an email, that's totally fine. And I also want you to know that if you get faculty letters, they don't have to be faculty from UCF. That's another common question that I get is, do they have to be UCF faculty members? No. You know, if there's someone from Valencia that you still talk to and you're super close with, feel free to use them if they're gonna write you a strong letter of recommendation. So in person, as best as you can, schedule a meeting, and you want to come prepared. And I'm gonna kind of show you what you can bring along with you to be prepared. And that's sort of a mini kind of portfolio of sorts. Don't feel that you have to include all of this, and don't feel that you're limited to this. I say think about your audience. Think about the person that you're asking a letter for a letter. Maybe it's a physician, and that physician's research is in like cancer or something like that, and you've done a really cool research project on that. Feel free to include an excerpt, an abstract, or anything like that. Faculty, I usually tell students to provide grades. I feel like that helps the case. Definitely a picture. And a small personal statement with descriptive words that they could use in the letter for you. So like I said, don't feel that you have to have all of this, but don't feel that you're limited to these things as well. I feel that the more you give that letter writer to write that letter for you, the more inclined they'll be to write the letter of recommendation and write a good one. Justin, you put one together, right? His was pretty nice. It had grades, transcripts, personals. Did you have a personal statement in there? Yeah, like his was really, really nice. And if I was a letter writer, I would appreciate it because I'd be inclined to go right in there, get it done. I'm not trying to remember what he did or piece it together, go back and look through emails. Everything would be right there, including who he is. Because I know me, I meet with a lot of students, so sometimes I know the name and not the face, or I know the face and not the name. So putting those things together could help with the progression of your letter. So I'm just gonna put a little piece in here about the PHPL letters packet. It's only for those applying to dental and medical school. We used to include podiatry, but not anymore. But if you're someone applying to dental or medical school, as long as you meet our minimum requirements, which are all on our website, you could use this letters packet. The good thing about this letters packet is that if you have a letter writer who has not been very attentive to what they've written, it gives us a chance to look at that before it's submitted. I've gotten letters with the wrong name, not signed, not on letterhead, and those letters can be disregarded by your program. So this is a nice way to kind of get a double check. It also allows for an autobiography. And a lot of students ask, well, Chantrice, why would I do an autobiography? The application already asks for a personal statement. They're different. Autobiography is your life. From the time you were born up until now, your goals, your aspirations, anything you want to talk about that you can't put elsewhere in your application. But your personal statement is a lot more targeted, right? Especially for like my law school students. Law schools are gonna want to know why you want to be a lawyer, what experiences you've had, and why that law school specifically. So personal statement is a lot more targeted. The autobiography for those who are eligible for letters packet goes that step further. And I had a student just this past cycle who got into UCLA, and she's pre-med, and out of her top three interviews, 2 of them asked about her autobiography. So they do read it. And what's nice about our letters packet is that it's one download. So we have everything, all the letters there, and the autobiography's tucked in there. So that's one download and everything is there, as opposed to like 5 different letters they have to click on, so on and so forth. So it even makes it easier for them. So all the information about letters packet is on our website, and it's not open right now. So for those who are getting ready to apply this upcoming cycle, if you're med or dental, it's not open right now, but hopefully by the end of the month, it should be up and running. Okay, so that concludes my presentation on letters. I'm gonna bring Justin up and let him talk to you about his experience, and then we could get into questions and things like that after.
Hi everyone, how's it going? Pretty good, awesome. My name is Justin Shaw. I'm a senior undergrad student here, finishing up this semester, and as Chantrice mentioned, I've been admitted to MD school starting in the fall. So I'm here to answer any questions you guys have about letters packet, application process, all that good stuff. So let's get cracking.
Yeah.
How do you ask for a letter from a non-science professor that you didn't build a relationship with? How do you go about the non-science letter?
Good question. I would say non-science is usually hardest for a lot of people, especially if a lot of your classes are in the hard sciences and you don't take a lot of non-science classes. For me, I'm a band nerd. I've been in lots of band classes here at UCF, and I've been in marching band, 450 plus people. The directors do not know me, but they've seen my face many times. So I just, sent an email, hey, do you have time to sit down this week and chat about experience and upcoming semesters for band, blah, 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 blah. I sat down with one of the director of athletic bands, Dr. Kaiser, and said, hey, I'm applying to medical school this coming cycle. Would you be able to write me a letter? So I would say gauge the non-science classes you've taken. If you've had any communication with those professors after that class, keep it up. Just keep your foot in the door and make sure that they know, oh, I'm gonna be applying in the future. If you're taking a non-science class right now, try to get to know the professor. At least open a channel of communication and say, hey, I don't need the letter right now, but I am gonna be applying to professional school in a year or in a few months, and I'd love for you to be one of my letter writers because I've really enjoyed your class and I've learned X, Y, and Z. Would you be willing to write me a letter when the time comes? And they might say yes, they might say no, but at least you'll know right then and there if they'll be willing to write you a letter. So I know it's kind of vague, but it really depends on the person, the classes you've taken, when you've taken them, and what kind of relationships you have with those professors. So, yeah. Other questions? There's no way.
We usually get a ton of questions in this workshop. What about our Instagram Live? Do we have any questions, anyone?
So far?
No?
No?
Okay.
If you guys have any questions on Instagram Live, feel free to type them in.
From the dual enrollment class you took in high school, can you still ask that professor for a letter of recommendation?
In theory, yes. For me, like I did dual enrollment in high school for like English, which non-science class, but that was so long ago compared to when I'm applying. I doubt that they know the current me as well as some of my current professors might in terms of my experience, and they might not have seen me in years. I would probably advise against it, especially if you have relationships with the professors here at UCF, which is where you're doing your degree or where you're taking current classes. I don't know if you concur with that or not, but yeah, it's case by case. Unless like you've been doing research with that professor since you were in high school and you've been doing projects together, maybe you have a publication, maybe you did a poster, and you still talk to them like throughout the past 3-4 years, then maybe you have a really strong relationship and they could write you a stronger letter than anyone here could. So I'd say case by case. Yeah.
You had mentioned the mini portfolio. Is that in person, like hand it to them, or just create like a file for them, like with PDFs and email it to them?
In person. Believe it or not, a lot of the professors aren't real tech savvy in some cases. I say that because, you know, when I got letters back from professors, many of them preferred snail mail, you know, or they would fax the letters to me. So I would say start off, especially if you're gonna ask them in person, have a portfolio printed, and then maybe have an electronic version for someone who wouldn't mind.
What about
Mhm.
in a binder is fine, or like just like
You know those report covers, like those plastic report covers that you could slip the side of it on? I would see a lot like that, and make sure you put like your deadline on there as well, and a thank you to them, but that would work. Or I've seen some in the pocket folders. Doesn't have to be fancy or official, but something for them to go off of. You have to get started on your letter.
That's pretty fancy. I went the cheap route out and slapped a staple on it and called it a day.
Right, he
Top
did.
left, right. Yeah, I mean, so one of my letter writers he's a physician back in Tampa, and I'm not gonna drive to Tampa just to hand him a packet of paper, so I just asked, hey, can I email you the PDF of what I was gonna give you? Yeah, just email the PDF, and I sent him a copy via snail mail, you know, it's 25 cents, whatever, just in case, you know, something comes up, there's a physical copy, but, yeah.
Any tips to ask like a physician you shadowed for like, let's say, a character letter?
Yeah, just ask. I'm just
Really?
kidding. No, in terms of that, I would say it depends on your experience. How long did you spend with that physician? Were you asking questions? Do they seem to have gotten to know you a little bit? Or, you know, like there's student A who is like, I'm here and I'm just observing. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of part of the point of shadowing. There's student B who's like, they're observing, asking questions. How did you decide on this specialty? Blah, 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 blah. And there is a conversational aspect to it. And they might get to know you, where you're from, what your values are, and get a better judge for kind of them seeing you as in the physician role. Like, do they think that you'd make a good doctor? I'd say those end up being the strongest letters. Some doctors might say at the end of your shadowing experience, yeah, if you ever need a letter, just let me know. That's what one of my docs did. And I was like, well, I will definitely take you up on that. So you'll see an email from me in a couple months, but that might happen. But I would say don't be afraid to follow up with an email right after your experience, or if you're sending a thank you note to them after you've shadowed, hey, I'm gonna be applying in the future. Would you be willing to write me a letter of recommendation? And either they'll say, no, sorry, I have no time because I'm a really busy doctor, or they'll say, yeah, sure, just send me over your stuff and we'll take care of it. So.
And Justin's a good example of that, because I specifically remember getting an email, snail mail, and a phone call from that same physician in Tampa, making sure that he had dotted all I's and crossed all T's for him. So to me, that spoke volumes about the type of student Justin was, shadowing and observing. So that's what you want, because he was like, listen, Chantrice, anything I can do to get him into med school? I said, I feel the same way. It's not my decision. I'm just packaging letters. But that's what you want. You want that enthusiasm, because you never know who that doctor may know and the connections he may have as a future colleague. So that was a really good example of someone who was passionate and wanted to write that letter of recommendation.
Yeah.
How would you go about getting a professional photo if you felt that would be helpful for your letter packet?
Professional photo, so I would say you don't need to have the most beautiful studio style photo to put, I mean, in reality it's gonna be like 2 inches by 2 inches when you print it on a piece of paper. I have a pretty cheap camera, but most iPhones nowadays, you put that thing in portrait mode, get some good lighting. And I mean, you only need to be, you know, shoulders up or whatever for a quick headshot. And you could use that for the rest of your application cycle, because when you log into secondary portals, they're gonna ask for that picture upload anyway, and just reuse it and reuse it as long as it's a relatively decent shot. I wouldn't go spend money on pictures or anything. I don't think it's worth it. But yeah, grab an iPhone, grab a friend. Hey, take a picture of me. Other questions, letters, applications? Is anyone feeling the stress? Upcoming cycle? Yeah, how many of you guys are applying this coming cycle to whatever program? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was kind of in your shoes last year because I was, February, March, getting all the letters in a row, and just use the letters packet. Like, if you go home and if you tried to come up with a list of reasons of why not to use the letters packet, I don't think you'd really be able to come up with any reasons. It is beautiful and perfect, and it will help you have less stress. So just do it.
Okay, okay. Well, if I don't have any questions or anything like that, we'll stick around. So the workshop's done, but if you have any other questions or anything else you want to talk to us about, we'll hang around for a little bit.